there, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you to DynamicsCon for putting on this wonderful virtual event. I just have a thought for the day for everyone, so I'll give you a couple seconds just to look over this.
Oh, here you go with the accountant's humor again.
Cynthia. So this is just a little bit of accounting humor, which Cynthia is not appreciating, just to start off the presentation and get everyone in accountant mode for the presentation today. So the good thing is that as accountants, we actually have the system to do most of the work for us, as long as we know how to properly take advantage of its functionality. So I've been a user in the system for over 5 years, but I definitely didn't know all these tips and tricks on day one. So what I'm going to share with you are things that I've picked up over the years that have made my life a whole heck of a lot easier. And I'm hoping that these tips and tricks can do the same for you as well. I'll also tell you how each of these tips has helped save me time in my former days as a corporate accountant. And I'm sure that some of you have experienced or are also experiencing similar situations as these. So just a little bit of information about myself. My name is Cari Corozza, and I'm a trainer with New View Strategies. As I mentioned, I've been a financial analyst and staff accountant, and I've been working with NAV and Business Central for over 5 years. So I've learned a lot along the way in my role as an accountant, financial analyst, and I'm excited to share that with you today. I also have my colleague, who you've already heard from a little bit, Cynthia Priebe here, and she's just going to be adding a little bit of color commentary to the session today.
It's not really a versus though, but my background is a little bit different, right? So
Yep.
I've been using NAV and Business Central since 2005, and I actually came from the partner channel, but I was also an end user as the general manager of the NAV partner. We use NAV internally. So you are going to possibly hear a little bit of a different perspective here, but this is really Cari's show. I'm just here for the color commentary.
Cynthia seems to think that accountants aren't already interesting enough, so she's going to add some excitement to our session today.
Hey, whatever it takes, Cari.
So the learning objectives for today, basically we're just here to try and help you make your jobs a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. So you can read on your own the areas of the system that we're going to be working in today, but we just want to show you how to best use the system and its functionality and hope that we can save you time.
That's the plan.
That is the plan. Let's get started in Business Central. So today we're going to be demoing everything live in Business Central. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Business Central. All right, so the first thing I'm going to demo, my tips and tricks kind of go in little groupings. So the first few things are going to be on general journals and how we can use those best. So I'm going to go ahead and I bookmarked general journals. So I'll click on that up here. And I'm just going to go ahead and hide my fact boxes to give myself a little bit more space to work with. And the first tip that I'm going to demo on this general journal screen is copy and paste of general journal. So I have here an Excel spreadsheet, accountant's favorite. And what I've done is I've simply taken my Business Central column and row setup, and I did a quick Control-C for copy, and you can see it tells me one row is copied. And then I pasted that into Excel, and this easily set up this template that I have up here. So then I just went out, filled my information. So I'm going to say that for this example, this is my monthly expense report. So on these lines, I'm hitting my expense lines, my bank account line, and I've assigned dimensions that are required for this. You'll note that there are some fields that I left blank. So just because you have fields or columns in this Excel template does not mean that you have to fill them in. So I've left project and area code blank because those are not applicable to this entry that I'm posting. So all I'm going to do in here is I'm going to copy only my data. I don't need to copy the header information. I'll copy from there to here. And again, just because I have these columns in here, since they're blank, I'm not going to copy those. I'm just going to copy the data that I have. So I do Control-C. I go back to Business Central. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to click in this margin over here, right near this arrow. And if I hit Control-V, and actually this is good that this popped up. So a lot of people struggle when they first try to do copy and paste because they run into a few errors. So this is a good one to see in case you run into it so you know how to fix it. So what it's telling me is I can't paste 4 rows in the selected 1 row. Because there's already document information in here, even though it might not look like it, it's telling us that we can't paste essentially 4 rows into that 1 row where there's already information. So what I recommend a lot is even before starting to try to do your copy and paste, go to Manage, Delete, and just make sure you delete anything that's already in this batch. So you can see it deleted that document number. So that might have been what was preventing us from pasting. So if I try that again, now you can see it's populated with all of my information from that Excel spreadsheet. So this is a really cool tip to know. And I really like to use this one. So
Cari, I got a question for you.
Sure.
You're saying that this was a newer tip that you learned,
Yes.
because we don't learn everything on day one, right?
Exactly.
We acquire this knowledge over time. What were you doing before you knew about this?
That's a really good question. So one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts is actually F8, which those of you that are familiar with that, it copies down the cell above. So I was going through a 100-line journal entry and I was pressing F8 down key, F8 down key, until I learned this, the copy and paste, and it saved me so much time. So
you had a party when you learned this,
I
right?
was very excited. Yes. Yes.
Of course.
Of course. Yep. So that's my first tip of the day, and hopefully this can help some of you out. Copy and paste will also work in other areas of the system. So I also use this on a lot of purchase invoices, purchase orders, things like that. You can use it on sales invoices, sales orders. So anywhere where you have these lines, you can use copy and paste. So it's a nice trick to know throughout the system and not just journal entries.
Great tip.
Thank you. So for the next tip, I have how to add attachments to journal entries and how to navigate back to these. So one thing that's important to note is that this will only work on general journals and not recurring journals. So keep that in mind. So I'm just going to go ahead and open my fact box back up. And under this incoming document files, if I click the drop down, I have something called attach file. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And a window will open. So I have two options from here. I can hit choose and I can navigate through my file folders on my computer and choose the file from there. Or what I like to do, and this is another small tip, is you can drag and drop. So if you're inserting an email as an attachment, you don't have to save this on your desktop and then go back and delete it later. You can just do a simple drag and drop. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drag and drop from my file explorer. And I have right here this test data. Actually, I'll do the general journal copy and paste. And I'll drag that. And so that one actually didn't work. And Cynthia mentioned something to me before. And if you do have a file that's too big, you might not be able to attach it. So I'm actually going to try a different file. And this is just all test data.
So one of the things that I like to do, and I'm thankful, Cari, that you're doing it, is share what we've experienced as we try these things.
Exactly.
When you get a message that tells you you weren't able to copy and paste something, or you try to bring a file over, because everybody makes these demos look so slick, and then you get back and you try it and it doesn't work quite right. So Thank you for sharing some of these. This is what might happen to you, and this is probably why.
Of course, yeah. And even as users, we're still running into these issues, and that's how we're constantly learning. So you can see I was able to attach my test data PDF. So if I look on every line of my journal entry as well, I can see that, whoops, that'll be after the fact that it attaches to all of the lines. So we'll see that after I post this journal entry. So I'm going to go ahead and post this. And one other quick tip, preview posting. I love this tip as an accountant because it allows me to see if there will be any issues before I post. So this looks good. You did see a little warning popped up, and you'll see that again when I go to post. So I'll give a quick explanation. And this little notification is just saying that the posting date of one or more journal lines is after the current calendar date. And that's okay. It's just letting us know, yes, I want to continue posting. So now that my lines were successfully posted, I want to show you how to navigate back to those and see that attachment. So you saw that it was attached on just the one line of the journal entry. If I go to General Ledger Entries, what I want to do is find that entry that I just posted, and you can see it's this top one here. However, I know that it was a 4-line journal entry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this column to this value, and it's going to bring up my 4 lines. So now you'll see if I click on all of the lines, I have my PDF attachment over here. So even though I only attached it to the one line on the general journal screen, it does attach itself to all of the different lines on here, including that bank account line. So pretty cool tip to know.
So Cari, what would be the benefit of this? I mean, why do I need to worry about putting attachments to a general journal line?
So I'm glad you asked that, Cynthia. So oftentimes as accountants, when we're making reclassing entries or something like that at the end of the month, we think to ourselves, well, I'm going to remember why I did this. I don't need any backup or anything. And then maybe a year later, 6 months later, the auditors come back and ask, well, hey, why did you make this adjustment for this amount to these accounts? And you think back and you're like, well, I know it made sense at the time, but for the life of me, I just can't remember why. So you go digging through your emails to try to find, if your boss told you to make a reclass, you go digging through your folders. Just save yourself the trouble and attach the documentation right there to your general journal.
Great tip.
Thanks. So we have one more on the journal entry piece of things. So the one I'm going to show you would have saved me a whole heck of a lot of time, again, had I known about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the chart of accounts. And I'm going to look for my expense lines. So I'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. I have this account, which is total expenses. If I click on this amount here, it's going to show me all of my lines. And I can see from this view, again, close my fact boxes. I have my global dimensions showing, so department and customer group. If I want to see my shortcut dimensions, you can either go into the individual line and go to each dimension, or if I go to entry, I have this option here called GL Dimension Overview. If I click that, it's going to bring me into a window, and I'm going to click Show Matrix. So what this brings up for me is all of those general ledger entries with all of my dimensions. So you can see I have my 2 global dimensions as well as my 2 shortcut dimensions. So there's not a whole ton of data in these other dimensions, but it does allow us to see each general ledger line with all of the dimensions assigned. So a lot of times I'll take this information, export it to Excel, and I'll either do a pivot table or a VLOOKUP based on this. So previously, I would go into each individual line and I would look at the dimensions for that line. So on a 100 line entry, I really wish I would have known about this because it would have saved me a lot of time.
All right, so we've been focusing a lot on journal entries here. Do you have anything else for the rest of us in the accounting department, like something related to payables maybe?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you stopped me because I could talk about journal entries for hours.
I know you.
I love journal entries. So yes, as Cynthia mentioned, let's move on to some documents, and we're going to demo that on purchase invoices. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my home screen. And I have this little action right here to create a new purchase invoice right from my home screen. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to enter my vendor name. And so you can see here, I was a little bit hungry when I created this vendor.
Cari, you're always hungry.
I know. And you know what? That's the great part about working at home is my kitchen's right next to me. So I can literally just eat all day long. It's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and select Cari's Donuts for the vendor. And what I'm going to show you first is recurring purchase lines. So if I go to my Tell Me and I search for recurring purchase lines, I'm going to click on this option right here. And just for purposes of saving time today, I've already set one up, but I'll walk you through what that looks like. So a recurring purchase line is something that you would want to use if you're finding yourself entering the same information from month to month or week to week on a purchase invoice. So essentially, it's establishing a template for you. So I've entered my GL accounts in here, and you can also use items. So you might want to use items on a purchase order. GL account number, a description, a quantity, and an amount. I've also assigned different department codes for each of these. So you might be getting a monthly invoice for utilities, and perhaps you're allocating that out to your different departments. So that's how I've set this up. The next thing you would need to do is assign this recurring purchase line to your vendor. So if I go under Actions, Functions, Get Recurring Purchase Lines, this is one of the ways you can assign it. So you can assign it when you're in a purchase invoice, or you can assign it just from the vendor card. So I've already assigned it, and you can see that I have all of these options set to manual. So the system is saying when you create a new quote or a new order or invoice or credit memo, how do you want these lines to be inserted? So there's a few options under here. If I do Edit List, and since we're in an invoice, I'll look at this one. So you can manually insert the lines, which would be me going here and getting them. You can automatically insert them, in which case they would populate into your lines, or you can do Always Ask. So Always Ask, a little notification would pop up saying, you have recurring purchase lines assigned to this vendor. Would you like to go get them? So I'm going to leave these as manual. And
now I can set these differently on the different documents, right? That's why it's here 4 times.
Good point,
right?
Cynthia. Yeah. So maybe for credit memos, maybe those are always being manually created and you're not using recurring lines. Yeah. So you might want to do manual on there, but maybe automatic on your invoice.
Great.
So yeah, I'll leave these all as manual. And by clicking on this and saying, okay, I'm going to say, these are the recurring purchase lines I want to bring into my invoice. So you can see how that populates it. So literally all I had to do on this invoice was enter my vendor, get my recurring purchase lines, and I'll have to enter an invoice number and to be able to post it. So it really is that easy to establish this template and use it over and over again.
Now, can I do something similar on the sales side?
Absolutely. So these are the recurring purchase lines. They also have something called recurring sales lines in Business Central. So you could use this for sales orders, sales invoices, sales quotes, just on the sales side of things. So great question.
Great. Good.
All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of my lines for the next piece of the demo. And the next thing I'm going to show are deferral templates.
So Cari, I wanted to let you know.
Yes.
When they told us what our time limit was, because you could talk about this for hours, I was actually concerned we were going to run out of time, but you're actually doing this at a really good pace.
I was going to say, how am I doing, Cynthia? I might be relying.
You're doing great, actually.
Great. I might rely on you a little bit just to keep me in check because I could go on about this stuff for hours and I don't want to bore everyone.
No problem. And like I said, you're going along good here. Just
awesome.
Thought I'd let you know.
Glad to hear it. Keep monitoring me, please.
We'll do that.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Tell Me and search for deferral templates. And I'm going to go there. And again, I've set one up, but I'm going to go over with you all the different options on here. So if I click into my deferral template. So what deferral templates do in short, they will defer a revenue or an expense to a later period. So for this example, I have a deferral code of insurance. So this is kind of just the descriptor, a short reference of what the code is. And then my description, I'm going to say this is a quarterly insurance policy. So I'm getting it 4 times a year. This deferral account, I've selected a prepaid insurance account. This is the account that the expense will be deferred to as a holding account until it's expensed out to your expense account on the GL.
And Cari, I just want to call that out because in helping customers set this up, when they have problems, that's where they make the most common mistake. They will put the expense account in there instead of the deferral account.
Right.
So
yes.
Just remember that.
That's a good point, and I've run into that before too. So yeah, make sure when you're setting this up, this is the account that the expense will be deferred to until it should be expensed out.
Correct.
Then down here you have your deferral schedule, and you can pick the amount that you want to defer by percentage. There's a few different calculation methods. You can see in this drop down. I've selected straight line, and for start date, you also have a few different options, and I'm just going to say I want to start at the beginning of next period. You can pick the number of periods you want to defer this over. If it's an annual thing, you might pick 12 months. If it's just 1 month, you can say 1 month or 1 period. I've selected 3 here since this is quarterly, so we'll amortize it over 3 months. And my period description, you'll notice here I have this percentage for. If you're not familiar with placeholder codes, sometimes that's a little hard for me to say, what a placeholder code is it's this code that you can put in. And I'll show you what's going to happen when we go to post this. But this percentage for is saying fill in the name of the month based on posting date for this description. So I've put this in here and I'll show you how it posts through, but this is a really cool tip to know. So now I'm going to go back to my purchase invoice. And even though the recurring purchase lines were set by vendor, the deferral code does not need to be assigned to a specific vendor. So you'll see here, I actually have this deferral code column, and that's what I'm going to use to assign the deferral code. So I would just go ahead and fill out my purchase invoice as normal. I'm going to look for...
So this is where I put the expense account.
Yep, so you would fill this out exactly the same way. You don't need to do anything differently, other than assign that deferral code, which makes it nice and easy because if you're adding these codes, nobody has to relearn or take different notes on anything because this process is the same, which is awesome. So I'll assign my department, quantity of 1, and I will say that this is going to be a $450 insurance policy. Now, if I go over to my deferral code and I select insurance, I can click on the 3 dots, the ellipsis here, and that will bring me to my deferral schedule. So here is where if you needed to, you could update some of this information, but you can also just see what's going to happen when you post it. So it's showing you, all of your information here, and then here are the journal entries with the amounts that are going to be deferred on these posting dates. Now notice my placeholder code of %4 has filled in with the name of the month. So this is pretty cool because, a lot of times we want to see what the actual month is for this. And as opposed to having to manually enter that, you can just see here that that placeholder code has populated with the name of the month. So again, this is something that would have saved me a lot of time and manual effort. As accountants, a lot of times we have a giant spreadsheet with prepaid amortization, and we're calculating it's over this many periods and it's this amount. So I'm going to write an entry for this amount in the current period. And then at month end, we're making that giant entry manually in Business Central. So this will save you a lot of time if you are able to use this functionality.
Can I see what that would look like hitting the general ledger from here?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, Cynthia. So if I go to posting and preview posting, I'm going to see here, I'm going to navigate to my GL entry, and it looks like it's going to be 10 entries. So if I look, there's a few different dates. So on 8/14, which is the original document date or posting date into the general ledger, I see that it's hitting the expense account for $450, but then it's also leaving that same expense account. It's crediting it for $450. And it's then debiting or going into my prepaid or deferral account. So you'll notice this is the account that we set up in that deferral code. Here at the bottom, I just have the other side of my entry, the automatically generated payables. And then you see each of the entries on September, October, November for moving it from the prepaid to the expense account. So you are able to see all those entries in advance also, which is kind of cool. And then one thing just to note as well, if you are using a deferral code, you will have to have the posting dates open for any posting dates in the future that you'll be hitting with this deferral. So I know that's something that I run into sometimes, is that I haven't opened up posting dates. I would recommend, for this one I'm posting 3 months into the future, I would then recommend closing those posting dates after I've posted this purchase invoice.
So Cari, I have to ask.
Sure.
Did you learn this from my article?
So Cynthia just wrote a great article on deferral codes, and Cynthia, it was a great article, and I was a little bit sad because I was so excited to write something on the same. But yeah, I'm excited to be able to share this. I think Cynthia and I are just on the same page that it's really a great tip and a great functionality that people should be using and taking advantage of if they can.
It is, and it's really kind of hidden. It's not out in the forefront. So right. I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
So I think you have a few more tips for us.
I do. So my next tip, and again, this is something that might be a little bit more hidden, as Cynthia mentioned. So you might have noticed this, you might have not. If I go to close out of my purchase invoice, a notification is going to pop up saying that this document has been saved but is not yet posted. Do you want to exit? In this case, yes, I do, because that's why I decided to exit out. I'm going to hit no, though, just to show you how you can turn that off. If I go to Tell Me and I search for my notifications, so you can see there's quite a few of them here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and search. I know that that was for closing an unposted document. So if I search for unposted, I can see I have this notification here, warn about unposted documents. If I don't want to see that window and have to close out of it every time I'm exiting out of an unposted document, I can simply disable that. So I'll go ahead and click that box there. Now, if I go back to my purchase invoice and I exit out, voila, magic, there's no notification. So I know this little notification drives a lot of people crazy, and they're like, I don't want to see this. Is there a way to turn it off? And there is, just by doing that. So I'm also going to share a couple of other notifications that I actually like for the most part. So if I go to my notifications and I am going to search, okay, so this one, purchase document with the same external document number already exists. So essentially this is saying you might have a duplicate invoice already in the system or purchase document. So I like to keep this one enabled because in my past, I have gone and I've entered my header information on a purchase invoice. I've entered my invoice number. I've done all the calculations I need to enter my lines. And then I go to post, and then the system says, hey, this might be a duplicate. You already have this external document number being used with this vendor. So I like to keep this on because at the time when you enter that external document number into the header, the system will notify you that it might be a duplicate. So it's really nice to know this information in advance and save yourself a little bit of time.
Agreed.
Cynthia, I'm assuming you've run into a similar situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I've seen that in a few companies, and it's a really nice control to have.
Yeah, and it's not usually that you entered the wrong external document number. It's really that you entered the same thing twice, and it would have been would have been nice if you would have told me earlier.
Exactly. Especially if you have some sort of approval process and somebody needs to look at it before. Yep. So I'm going to show you this one. Confirm posting after the current calendar date. So that's actually the notification that you saw when I went to post that general journal. So if I didn't want to see that because I posted anyway, I could disable this right here. You may want to see that because perhaps you don't want to be posting documents into the future, in which case you could leave it enabled. But I just wanted to point that out to you.
But Cari, these are warnings, right? So in that case,
correct,
it was letting me know that, but I could still proceed.
Correct.
So be careful. If it's something that you're constantly going through, then you're going to just start ignoring it anyway. If it's something that occasionally happens and you'd like to be notified and be able to continue, then go ahead and leave it enabled.
Yeah, good point, Cynthia. So like she said, it's not an error. It's still going to let you. It's just telling you. It's the system notifying you of something.
Right.
So I like those. They're not. I don't think they're necessarily a huge time saver, but I think they're just more. I hear Cynthia making some noises in the background.
Wait a minute. No, I disagree because again, how many times have you entered that whole invoice and then went to post and you got the external document number?
You're right. That's a good point.
I guess it depends on how big an invoice it is that you're entering and you get that error, how often it happens. So
exactly.
I disagree. I think it's a time saver.
All right. So it's a time saver, and I sometimes get a little bit annoyed by those notifications if, like Cynthia said, you know that they're there and you have to click out of it. It might make sense just to disable that notification.
All right. So these have been really great. Do you have more?
I do have more. So what I'm going to deal with now is a little bit of navigation through the system. So I'm going to go back into my purchase invoice so that I can post it, and I'll show you a couple different ways to navigate back to that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and post. And actually, speaking of notifications, here's another one. This is saying that the invoice is posted. Do you want to open it? So again, this you would have found in that list of my notifications. And in some cases, you might want this on. In some cases, you might want to disable it. So I'm going to go ahead and say no. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to navigate to my Cari's Donut.
Now I'm hungry.
I know. I could use a donut with my coffee right now, actually. Too bad we can't do virtual donuts. All right, so I'm going to navigate into my vendor card for Cari's Donuts. And now if I go to vendor and ledger entries, this will show me all of my entries that have been posted for Cari's Donuts. I just want to show you, if I go to my filter pane, it doesn't look like there's any filter that's being applied to this data. However, the system is applying a filter to vendor number, and you'll see that with this little symbol right here. So you might not notice these filters in the system if you just go to a certain screen like I did through ledger entries, but the system is navigating to this data based on different filters. So if I wanted to, if I'm looking at Cari's Donuts and now I say, oh, well, I want to see this invoice for this other vendor, I can go here and I can clear my filter. And notice right now it's showing me Cari's Donuts and it's vendor ledger entries now. So this will bring me to my vendor ledger entries screen. And I can see here that I have all my different vendor numbers listed. So if I wanted from this data, I could go ahead and filter on a different vendor, or I could filter on different information. So if I want to see all of the information, the ledger entries for this vendor, I can go back to my dropdown and do filter to this value. So I like this tip because I think that it really helps with navigating efficiently through the system, knowing that from one screen you can kind of manipulate the data or navigate to other data in the system without having to leave that screen.
So, but Cari, let's say that from the get-go, I knew that I just want to go see all the vendor ledger entries. Do I have to go through a vendor to do that?
Good question. So we did navigate through the vendor to get to that vendor ledger entry screen for this example, but you could also go to Tell Me and search for vendor ledger entries, and you can go to it directly through this right here.
Well, that's good to know. So more than one way to get to the same place.
Definitely. And then from that vendor ledger entry screen, if you say that you want to look into a different vendor a little bit closer, then you can filter that information based on that. So good question.
Great.
All right, so the next tip I'm going to show, this will be tip number 8. I'm moving right through. I'm going to show you how to pay a vendor directly from the vendor card. So again, if I click into Cari's Donuts, I'm going to go to Actions and I'm going to go to Pay Vendor. What this is going to do is I'm going to close my filter. It's going to bring up all of the invoices that I can pay for Cari's Donuts. So again, you'll notice that there are filters that are being applied by the system. It's filtering on Cari's Donuts with a document type of invoice and a remaining amount that's not equal to 0, or that is less than 0 in this case. So even though I navigated just to create a payment, notice that the system is applying these filters. So then what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to select the invoices that I want to pay, and I'm just going to do this first one that we just posted. And if I go to Actions, Create Payment, it's going to pop up with a window asking me to fill out some information, and this all looks okay. And this is now going to populate my payment journal. So a lot of times companies will make payments directly from the payment journal, and they'll go to prepare and suggest vendor payments. In this case, I can do it directly from the vendor card if this is just a single payment. So then from here, I can just go ahead and post the payment. This can also be done on the customer side of things. So instead of having to create a deposit, you can do what's called register payment directly from that customer card. So I like this tip because as a smaller company, the company that I work at, we don't have a ton of vendor payments or a ton of customer receipts. So I like to be able to do it directly from that vendor card or that customer card. And I'll also show you here, you can see that there's this balance due for this vendor. So I could say, okay, I want to create a payment for this full amount. Same on the customer side, you can see who has a balance and match that up with your payment. And then you can go ahead and register that payment from the customer screen.
I think that's helpful too when somebody comes in and says to you, hey, we want to get this vendor paid, especially if you're having cash flow issues, right? Where you're being a little more selective and you're doing things kind of one-off instead of using suggest vendor payments to populate the big payment journal. I think this is a much easier way to do it than what we used to have to do, create one line and then drill down and apply entries. This kind of gives us a different, more user-friendly view of everything.
Yep, exactly. So now for the next tip, tip number 9, this is going to be about error correction. So as much as we all try to be perfect and not make any mistakes, we are most likely...
Wait.
Okay, Cynthia.
Perfect. So
you are perfect. Okay, well, then you can go ahead and you can take the next 2 minutes to catch up on other things. But if you have any questions about error correction in the future, you'll have missed out on this great information. So
I'll go get a donut.
yeah, share them with the rest of us. Please.
I think I need to watch this. Go for it.
So this is a little bit newer functionality, and this makes error correction a lot easier. So I'm going to go to my posted purchase invoice that I just posted. And if I navigate into it, so I have this option up here called correct. And if I click on that, there's a few options. So I'm just going to highlight what these will each do. So create corrective credit memo. What this one is going to do, and you'll see a little notice pops up telling you with more information, it's going to create a credit memo for this invoice that you complete and post manually to reverse this posted invoice. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to take all of this header information, all of this line information, create a credit memo, a purchase credit memo, and you have the chance to review and adjust that information before posting. You might want to use this functionality if you have a partial credit. So you could create the credit memo from here and then adjust your amount. And you also might want to use this if you have any sort of workflow in place. So if a credit memo needs to be sent for approval first, you might want to create that credit memo and then send it for approval from there. The other option we have here is cancel. So this is going to create a post-purchase credit memo that reverses this posted purchase invoice. So this is going to do the same function as this one, but it's going to post it. So again, if you just want to completely reverse this document, if it was maybe posted in error or as a duplicate, you can use that cancel function, and it's going to create that credit memo, post it, and apply those to each other. So really, really simple. The other option we have up here is correct. So what this is going to do is it's going to perform the cancel function. So it's going to reverse this invoice and post it, and then it's going to create a new purchase invoice. So we're saying this purchase invoice was incorrect for some reason. Maybe it was the incorrect GL account. So it's going to create a credit memo, post that, and then create a new purchase invoice with this information that you can adjust before posting. So you could update either your GL account or your amount before posting. So these are some really cool options up here. Again, you might use this one if you have some sort of workflow in place. But these are newer functionality in Business Central. And as mentioned, we try not to make errors and have to do a lot of error correction, but knowing that we have this functionality makes it a lot less daunting to have to go and do something like that.
And then, Cari, I just want to add that there are certain situations where you would think you just want to be able to cancel, but maybe it's already been paid and there's payment applied.
Right.
If you go to do one of those corrective measures and it's not allowed, you will be prompted, and you may be able to just use the function create corrective credit memo. So it is really helpful if you get into one of the situations where one of the actions is not able to be performed, it'll let you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes too, as Cynthia mentioned, if you have a payment applied, you can always go to your ledger entries and unapply that payment and then perform the action as well.
Right. But regardless, this is so much easier. Anyone who's used NAV before,
Yes.
Business Central knows all the copy document stuff we had to do.
Yes.
This is leaps and bounds ahead of that.
Yep. So yeah, anyone who's used copy document, yeah, you will definitely notice that this is significantly easier in Business Central.
Absolutely.
So now we get to the final tip, and my favorite functionality of Business Central. So I'm excited to demo it. I hear Cynthia laughing. I'm wondering if she knows what it is.
Yeah, I think because, you're just freakishly excited about this.
It's something to be really excited about. So the option to edit in Excel is something that's new in Business Central. Is that what you were thinking of, Cynthia?
Yes, it was.
All right. I don't hide my excitement about this. This is a great feature. So I'm going to go to my vendor list. And from this vendor list, if I want to make changes to this vendor information, I click into the vendor card and I update it. Well, what if I want to make changes to a bunch of this information at once? If I go to Page, I have two options here. I can open this information in Excel, which is also nice from a lot of other areas of the system to export that information, or I have this option to edit in Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and click that one, and it will pop up with my Excel window down here. And I do need to click Enable Editing at the top. And sometimes, depending on the information, it takes a little bit to load. So you will also notice that this window over here popped up. And what this is it's the data connector. So this is what's going to allow us to make changes and then publish this back into Business Central. So the first time that you do something for Edit in Excel, you might have to log in with your Microsoft credentials, but then going forward, it should automatically open like it did in my case. So if we just take a quick look at this information that's populated here from the vendor cards, you'll notice that we have everything we saw on our vendor list screen, but we also have all of the available vendor information that's held in that card. So on here, I'm going to go ahead and add phone numbers to these. So say previously, maybe we weren't storing phone numbers, but we need to add them now to do some sort of calling list or something like that. So we're just going to go ahead and add all of that. I'm going to add it to all of my vendor cards. And you see how easy that was. I just was able to update all of that information at once. Now, if I go over here, if I click this publish option, it's going to work on it a little bit, but then what it's going to say is publish successful and workbook is updated. So I'm going to close out of here. I'm going to navigate back to Business Central. And remember that we added phone numbers. So if I click into this vendor card, I'm going to see that now there's a phone number populated in here. If I go to the next record, it's there as well. So this is a really neat option to edit a lot of information at once. You don't need a programmer or developer to change this data, but you can do it yourself. But because you can do it yourself, I also would just take caution with permissions and who has the ability to change this data so that it's not accidentally getting changed.
I was just going to say another big use for this would be when you have salespeople and you're setting salesperson's codes on
Absolutely.
the customer records, and you have a salesperson leave, and all of a sudden you need to reset the salesperson on all the customer records that salesperson was previously on. This edit in Excel is a wonderful tool for that. In the past, you used to have somebody help you manipulate the data to make that update make sense and happen quickly. Now you can do it as an end user.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that probably is a common situation, right? Something that a lot of people might run into. A cool control about that, though, is, so if we were trying to update general business posting group, and say we put in Mickey Mouse or something like that for the posting group, Business Central is not going to allow us to publish that information back. In that data connector, it's going to say that you've entered invalid information because it recognizes that Mickey Mouse is not a selection for general business posting group. So there are some controls around that, and it is kind of validating that data before it enters it in there.
Absolutely is.
So unless Cynthia has anything to add, that brings us to the end.
That was 10 tips in what, about 40 minutes? That's amazing, Cari.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you to DynamicsCon for putting on this awesome virtual event. I really hope that everyone at least got a little bit something out of this session.
Yeah, we really hope that today, from this session or from any of the sessions in this great event, you've been able to learn something that you can take back with you right away, or maybe just imply right at the desk that you're sitting at, and use it right away. And I think that's really our goal as an organization, that whenever we interact with customers or an event like this, is that we've given you something that you can use right away.
Absolutely. So thanks again to everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your sessions.
Thank you. And join us in the conference chat where we'll answer some of your questions.